God's way. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the book of Proverbs, except for this first week. The first week here, the book of Proverbs deals a lot, about 5 chapters. It deals with adultery, the issue of adultery. Today, I'm not going to use a whole lot of Proverbs, but we're going to talk about just basically the God's view of how to use sex in our lives. And I speak on this about 18 months, I would say, in here. And the reason I do is because I believe it is so critical to the future fulfillment of most of our lives, of having the fulfillment that God would want us to have in our lives. The decisions you make in regards to how you use sex in your life will have the greatest positive or the greatest negative impact on your life of any other decisions that you will ever make. Scripture's pretty clear on this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, it reads this. It says, "Run from sexual sin. No other sin is so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body." Paul makes it pretty clear that sin is sin, but sexual sin has larger temporal consequences than other sins do because it's a sin against your own body. It has devastating consequences to your own body, and I would even say to your own mind. So we are warned of it in the Scriptures. Now, the thing is this. We live in a society that is completely opposed to God's original design and purpose for sex. In fact, the world has been so successful that most people, including a majority of Christians, actually see God's view of sex as outdated, unrealistic, and basically a joke. It's kind of just a laughing thing like, well, that was 2,000 years ago. We live in 2015. That doesn't apply to us anymore. So let me start this morning by just introducing to you what the world's view of the use of sex is, in case you don't know. But since we all live in America and we live in the same society, you should know this. But basically, here is what the view of sex is in our world today, and it is this. If it feels good, do it. If you think it's going to feel good, do it. Everything is fair game. Okay, that is the message we get from our society, and it is beat into us day in, day out, from the time we were born until the time that we start to understand what sex is. We get that message constantly. Let me illustrate that for you. Here are just some stats I want to share with you. First slide. The average teen sees 14,000 sexual references per year on TV. 81% of TV programs have sexual content. You will see 6.7 sexual references per hour on TV. 20% of programs show sexual intercourse or imply it. 53% of songs have sexual content. Next slide. 81% of videos have sexual content. Music videos average 97 sexual situations per hour. There's an estimated 5.4 million porn sites. 34%, a third of all search engine requests around the world are for porn. 41% of all downloads on the internet are pornography. Next slide. 69 million Americans visit porn sites per month. 90% of 10 to 16-year-olds have viewed porn on the internet. 40% of visitors to internet porn are female, which I always say is most people are shocked by that from the older generations, is that 40% of visitors to internet porn are female, and 90% of all sexual encounters on TV are between unmarried people. Okay? That is the society we live in. It just is what it is. It's not going to change anytime soon. That's the society we live in, and we are pushed with a certain message from our society constantly. Now, let me share with you what God's intent for sex was. And I don't even have to read some of this because whether you're a Christian or not, I could ask you this question. What is God's intent for sex? When should it happen? Say what? Okay, everybody knows this, whether you're a Christian or not. Even when I was an atheist, I knew it was in marriage, is what Christians say, okay? We all know the answer. Let me give you some of the scriptures. Genesis 2:24, right from the creation account, it says this. This explains why a man leaves his father and his mother and is joined to his wife. The two are united into one. So it talks right from the creation account. The reason a man leaves his father and mother is to be united to his wife, and that's a reference there to sexuality that unites them into one, all right? And 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, it reads, God's will for you is to be holy, to stay away from all sexual sin. Then each of you will control his own body and live in holiness and honor, not in lustful passion like the pagans who do not know God or his ways. Okay? This was written 2,000 years ago, and that applies just today as much as it did then, is we are not to live the way the world lives who doesn't know God in lustful passions like the rest of the world. Now, it's important for us to understand why God would give us these instructions, why God would give us this guidance. Because if you understand why, you're much more likely to follow his guidance. Here's why. He is your creator, and he loves you. That's the two things you need to know. God created you. He loves you. Therefore, he wants what's best for you and what will bring about the best results in your life. And he also wants to protect you from things that will hurt you and hamper you in life. That's why God gives us instructions, because he knows what works best, because he created everything. And he goes, I know the path that will lead to the best results in your life. We also need to understand that God's ways make logical and practical sense when we would just think them out, even though we have been told by the world they are foolishness. 1 Corinthians, Paul says this in chapter 1, he says about God. He says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. So where does this leave the philosophers, the scholars, and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look foolish. I believe this is absolute truth. And that's why this morning I will illustrate this truth, that God makes the world's wisdom look like utter foolishness in regards to how God designed for the use of sex. Okay? Now, a couple of things before we get into this. I am uniquely qualified to make a biblical defense on this topic due to my life choices. As a lot of you know, I did it God's way. The first time I had sex was on my honeymoon night, on my wedding night was the first time I've had sex, and I've had sex with one woman, Autumn. That's the only one in my entire life. Now, I don't say that to brag, to be like, oh, look at me. I'm telling you that so the things I speak about doing it God's way, you understand is from life experience, not from hypotheticals. Okay? So other people can get up here and go, I can give you hypothetically how this works on how it benefits you doing it God's way. I can tell you from life experience, here's how it does. Okay? So that's why I tell you that first one. My other unique thing is this. As you know, I did youth ministry for 10 years with hundreds of teens up north for the first decade of my ministry. So I got to see this firsthand all the time and deal in this realm a lot. And now as a senior minister for another 8.5 years, I also get to see the other side on the adult side. So I have a lot of experience of seeing how using sex improperly and outside God's design affects people and affects relationships, because I get to study it constantly. All right? So I have a very unique view on this and a very unique position to give a biblical defense of God's view. The other thing before we start, I also want you to understand, is this. Just because I did it God's way does not mean I have a perfect marriage. Okay? Please do not get that opinion. I do not have a perfect marriage just because I did it God's way. It doesn't make everything else easy. I'm still in a marriage where my wife has a lot of issues. So it makes it, okay? So we have to work a lot of things out. As you know, on my side, there's not nearly as much there. It's pretty easy living with me. But like all marriages, we have lots of issues because we're two different individuals learning to live together and living together now for 18.5 years. We have a lot of things that we have to work through, and we have struggles that we work through just like everyone else. Just because you do it God's way doesn't mean everything's just perfect and you never struggle. Yeah, you still struggle. At the same time, if you didn't do it God's way, I want you to know that doesn't mean you still can't have a fruitful marriage. Absolutely you can. Why? Because we serve a God of restoration. We serve a God that can repair things. We serve a God that can restore things. So you can still have a fruitful marriage, even if you didn't follow God's way at the onset. But you also need to understand this. You will have a lot of issues me and Autumn will never have to deal with. And complexities in your marriage me and Autumn will never have to deal with because you went outside God's boundaries and outside God's design for that. So you will have some extra hurdles that you have to work in your relationship that me and Autumn get to avoid. That's the benefit to us, okay? Now, the problem is this, is when you look at the wisdom of the world, on its surface, it actually looks really brilliant. It just does. It looks wise unless you take the time, like I said earlier, to really think about it. The world's view of how to use sex is very convincing when you just listen to it and act on it without thinking about it. But God's view of sex and how it's to be used has a ton of benefits to your life that you would avoid a lot of pain and a lot of complexities if you would follow his route. That's what I want to share with you this morning. I want to share the 4 big benefits of using sex God's way with you this morning. All right? The first thing is this. The first benefit of using sex God's way is this. Love can be properly developed. It allows an atmosphere where love can genuinely be developed the way that God desires for it to be developed between a relationship between a man and a woman. What the world will tell you is this. The world will tell you that sex is an ultimate expression of love and that it will strengthen your relationship. You will hear this in your teen years and in your college years, that sex is the thing that will cement the relationship. It will pull you together, and it's actually the most loving thing that can happen between a couple is sex. And I'm here to tell you this morning that is not true. Okay? Sex does not equal love, and most of you have probably learned that lesson through your life at some point. Sex does not just equal love. What love is this. Love is a commitment to bettering another person's life no matter the circumstances. That's ultimately what love is no matter what the circumstances is, I'm here to better this person's life no matter how hard it gets, no matter what trials we go through. I am here to try to better that person's life. That is ultimately what love is. There's also a side part of that that's emotional. There's an emotional connection with love as well. But primarily love is I am looking to better this person and to make their life better no matter the circumstances we go through. That's the type of love we all want to be in a relationship with, is it not? We all want to have a spouse. We all want to have that person that is always looking at us going, I want to make your life better. And even if I don't like you right now, even if I'm not happy with you, I'm still going to do what's best for you. And I want to do things that make you happy. That's ultimately what love is. Now, females fall for this argument way more than males, okay? Which is most men know sex doesn't equal love. Is that correct? Yes, we know that. Not all of us are going to shake our heads, but we know this, okay? Women, on the other hand, actually think it does a lot of times. But girls think if I just have sex, it will pull my relationship together. When it starts falling apart, if I would just have sex, it will make everything work out. But women, you need to understand this. When guys have sex outside of marriage, their only motivation is lust. Just being honest with you. Outside of the marriage relationship, when guys are having sex with girls, the entire motivation is lust. And lust is purely a selfish motivation, which is the total opposite of what love is. Because love is about being unselfish. Lust is completely about you and what it brings to you. So it is unable to bring any type of depth to a relationship. Most of us notice as we get older and we look back on the younger people. We see them have sex and you want to just go, man, I just wish you wouldn't do that because it's going to blow that relationship up. It's going to make it worse. It's going to damage the person. And we can see it on the outside because most of us have learned lessons, but people still make the same decision over and over. You need to understand, sex motivated by lust actually hinders a relationship. Let me tell you one of the most devastating ways it does. It clouds people's opinions and it clouds their thought processes. Adults who have experience in this realm, how many of you know multiple couples you've seen before that were unmarried, that were dating or whatever, that were in what you knew to be unhealthy relationships? But then they started to have sex and they stuck it together when they probably shouldn't have. How many of you have witnessed that? Almost all of us, okay? You see it. Here's the thing. I had a friend, we'll call them Sue and Jim, good friends of ours back in college and all. Back when, oh, wait. Maybe you won't. It's not the Sue and Jim you know, okay? We'll just call them Sue and Jim. But if we remember back in college, they were friends of mine in Autumn's. And they started dating, and Jim was a very mentally abusive male in the sense that he would put Sue down constantly and make her feel low. But Sue started having sex with Jim. And through that, Sue couldn't see Jim anymore for what he really was. And I remember as they were thinking about getting engaged and getting married, we kept telling Sue, Sue, you don't want to marry him. He puts you down constantly. He says these awful things about you. You're not the person you used to be. You're just someone that just walks on a shell of who you used to be, and you just lost kind of your luster. You've lost just the energy and the spark that you used to have, and he's taken it all. She couldn't see it. Why? Because she was having sex with him, and it clouded her emotions in a relationship. And what happened was it was 7 years of total misery for Sue before the whole thing broke up. Why? Because eventually she found out 7 years and 2 years prior to that, 9 years into this thing, it's not getting better, and this guy's now starting to get to the point of physical abuse, and it's starting to get bad. And I remember her having phone conversations with us going, I don't know how he turned out to be this way. And we're going, dude, we were telling you back, the first 6 weeks into dating this guy, this is what this was. And we've told you your whole life that's what it was, and you shouldn't have gone there, but you were clouded in your emotions and you can't see it, and now you have devastating results, and now you're going to be a divorced woman with a child, and you're just going to have a mess on your hands, and it's not going to be a happy life from here on out. You've got some struggles. God can repair it, Amy, Sue. God, geez. None of you know her, so it's not like you're going to know her. But anyways, just hope it doesn't get on audio somehow and get back out. But anyways, the thing is you look at it and you just go, everybody could see it. We weren't the only, everybody could see what you're walking into, but you were clouded by your emotions because you were in a sexual relationship instead of letting love develop the way God intended it to develop. How many of you know those stories? Okay, if you look around people, that's about every adult. You need to understand God tries to protect us from having our emotions clouded so that love can develop the way God intended it to develop between a man and a woman that will last you in a marriage. Okay? The second benefit of using sex God's way is this. It prevents your past from affecting your future. Prevents your past from affecting your future. Here's what the world says to you. You want to get experience before you're married so you can be good in bed and make sure you're sexually compatible with someone before marrying them. Okay? That's what the world tells you. You want to make sure you're experienced so when you get married, you don't stink in bed. And they also make this argument, that sounds really good. You don't want to get married to someone, never have had sex with them, and then find out you're not compatible and sex doesn't work. Now, logically and all that, if you don't think about that, you go, wow, that sounds really good. Okay, that makes some sense. Now, guys fall for this one. Okay, this is the one guys fall for. So guys go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to be good at it. I don't want to be embarrassed when I get married, and I don't want to get stuck with someone I'm not sexually compatible with. But here's the thing. If you have no sexual experience before marriage, then you are guaranteed to be sexually compatible once you are married because you have nothing to compare it to. Let me give you the best example of this. Me and Autumn have been married 18 years. We could be having the worst sex in the world and we don't know any better. Just being honest with you. But it's worked for 18 and a half years. I got 2 kids, so obviously I know what we're doing because we produced 2 children out of it. But we hear that and we laugh about that, but I want you to understand something. Is that not logical and practical and true? The world messes with us and makes us go, oh, that makes a lot of sense that if we would just have sex beforehand, we'd be good in bed when we get married and we find out if we're sexually compatible. And you're going, no, it doesn't. If you know what those results also come with it, those lead to other devastating things in your relationship down the road, and it's not smart. What's smart is if I have nothing to compare it to, I don't know any better. That's what's smart. God's way of wisdom is the smart way of following your life. What you also need to know is this. Sexual experience before marriage brings about comparison problems within a marriage that are devastating that me, as your minister, have to deal with all the time. Okay? I deal with couples all the time because if you've been married for any amount of time, again, 18 and a half years here, you have times where the sexual relationship's not the greatest thing in the relationship, okay? You go through some spells where things can be tough because of stress and different things happening in life, and you go through ups and downs. And during those down times, if you have prior sexual experience, one of the things that becomes very devastating and Satan uses in your marriage is, are they looking to go get it somewhere else because they're not satisfied with me? Or are they thinking about other people that they once had sex with? And it becomes a devastating thing. And here's the thing. Women, you know this is what happens in your head because I hear it from you when you're talking to me when your marriages are going south. Guys at times think this. Women think about this all the time, whether they express it to their husband or not. Women are always going, is he still thinking about the other people that he has in his book from the past? It's devastating. It adds complexities to a marriage that you don't want to have to deal with. It adds extra stress that you don't want to have to deal with. And if you can prevent it early on so you don't have to deal with those complexities. The third benefit of using sex God's way is this. It protects us from emotional damage. Okay? It protects us from emotional damage. Here's what the world tells you. There are no consequences of sex if you can just avoid an STD or pregnancy. Okay? That's what they're going to teach all of your kids. What we all got taught in school is the only consequence of sex is STDs and pregnancy. That's the bad stuff that can happen with sex. That's the consequences. Let me tell you the other consequences that are just as devastating, more long-term. Okay? There are other consequences to sex. Females, let me first talk to you. Let me tell you what the damage to you is you lose a part of your inner self-worth with each partner and each breakup. This loss gets expressed typically in one of two ways. I have seen this countless times. My sponsor group, we used to sit around back when I was doing teen ministry, and we could literally know exactly when a girl who had just broken up with a boyfriend, if they'd had sex with them or not, because you could see the physical changes in their life within days. Okay? Because what happens to women is women start to lose part of their inner self-worth with every partner and every breakup that happens. And the way it gets expressed is this. Some girls start to become an object of sexuality. So what you will see is they start dressing differently to reveal more and more of their self. Because what happens is this. They no longer can find self-worth in themselves. And the only way they can find it anymore is when men look at them as sexual objects. So you will see them dressing in ways and trying to grab attention towards themselves because they no longer feel loved or feel of any worth internally. And the only times they ever feel that way is when people look at them sexually. And then for that brief second, they go, I have some worth because I'm a sexual object. We see this play out in front of us constantly in our own realm, but you also see it in Hollywood. Watch Hollywood. Watch the female actors go down the road. It's the same, it's like deja vu over and over and over again. You can see them when they become kid stars, when they become sexually active, and then you can see it just progress. And they become less and less clothes and less clothes. Then you get the weird ones who never learned anything better, and if you know her name, Madonna. You see Madonna? Those that grew up with her in your generation, the woman's now like in her 50s, and still, it's how do I get sexual attention any way I can. This week she had her thing where she flipped up her skirt so you could see her butt and everything else and dressed in like this like domineering costume on a red carpet. Why? Because my belief is this. The only way Madonna finds any self-worth ever anymore is if people look at her sexually. And for that brief second, she goes, I have value. Women, you know what I'm talking about. If you've had multiple partners in the past and broke up, you know what I talk about, and you know how Satan uses this to destroy you internally all the time. Can God repair it? Absolutely. But it is devastating to women. The other way women cope with it is this. They go that route, or they go to the route of this. They cover themselves up. And they withdraw from the world. And you can see it happen in teenagers because teenagers don't know how to control their emotions. So you can see it widely in teenagers very quickly. So they either got to get sexual attention, or they withdraw and they hide themselves from the world. And we could sit there in sponsors meeting going, boom, boom, boom. Okay, who wants to go talk to her? Who wants to go talk to her? And who wants to go talk to her? Who wants to go minister to them? Because they're going to need help. And it's so sad to see, but you can see those consequences. It's not just about STDs and pregnancies. Now, guys, it's different, okay? Guys, we're not as emotional, so it doesn't affect us the same way it affects women. Let me tell you what happens to guys. Guys, when you have multiple sexual partners, it makes it harder and harder for you to find satisfaction in just one sexual partner. What this does is it starts to lead to infidelity. It leads to you having the inability to stay faithful to one person in a relationship, and you keep imploding relationships over and over again because you can't stay faithful. What they have started to learn through research, and this goes for sexual activity in guys, also goes for pornography in guys. They have found, this is research now, it starts to change the chemistry of the brain and it starts to reorder how your brain thinks, men. And what happens is this: sex becomes more than just sex, okay? It becomes sex with different people that achieves the excitement that you're looking for. That's how your brain gets recalculated in men, is no longer can just sex satisfy you. What it becomes is sex with different people that achieves the excitement that you're looking for. So the more sexual partners you have, the less ability you have to actually find satisfaction in just one person and have a healthy relationship. And the more you have, the worse that gets. The other thing that happens in men is this: it dulls your ability to emotionally connect to a female. The best way I used to describe this to teenagers is we'd take a piece of tape, and we'd have like 80 high schoolers in our group. We'd take a piece of tape at the beginning of my discussion, and I would tell them, start over here, put it on your pants, take it off, pass it to the next person, they would put it on their pants. And you take it off and you put it, and we'd pass it around, and I'd get there like the 80 senior hires. And at the end, I'd get the piece of tape, and I would stick it on my pants, and it wouldn't stick. It just falls straight off. Why? Because it picks up all that lint from all the pants, and it's not sticky anymore. The best way I can describe a man's mental state is the more sexual partners you have, the less ability you have to connect to a female emotionally. It just starts to, best way I describe it, dulls you. And if you can't connect with a female emotionally, it's very hard to have a happy, fulfilling relationship with a female. Okay? Now again, can God repair that? Absolutely. But it's something that God wants to protect you from, that you don't have to be repaired from if you would just follow God's way from the start. Okay? Now the last benefit of using sex God's way is this: it builds a significant foundation of trust into your marriage. Now, what the world says is this: the world says if you're going to get married anyways, why wait? And let me make this more specific. This is what all the Christians say, okay? Which is, I'm engaged to be married, or this person's going to be the one I married. Why should I wait anyways? Because this is going to be the only person I ever sleep with anyways. And that might be true, and that might be good. And you might go, well, that makes sense then. What harm is there? Let me tell you what you're missing out on. You miss out on a huge benefit, and it's called trust. Here's how this works. For 2.5 years, my wife and I dated for me, it was between the ages 19 and 21. 2.5 years I dated my wife, and I never had sex with her. How many times a day do you think I wish I did? A lot, okay? Let's just be honest. I was 19 to 21 years old. I thought about that a lot. I would have liked to have had sex a lot for 2.5 years while I was dating my wife, but I didn't. And I was in situation in college where nobody could have stopped me. It wouldn't have mattered. Nobody would have ever known. There would have been no judgment or anything. I could have just done whatever I wanted, and there would have been no immediate consequences to that behavior. But what I would have lost out on is something I didn't realize till later on in my life, and that is this: when I leave my wife to go off, not leave her, when I leave my wife to go off to a conference, or I leave my wife to go somewhere for a week or something like that, and we are separated, do you think my wife really worries that some lady's going to tempt me to have sex with her in a week's time? For 2.5 years, the woman tempted me, and I resisted. Okay? Just because of who she was. I thought she was hot. So I was like, okay, she didn't have to do anything. I was tempted as a guy. At the same time, when my wife leaves me and has to go somewhere, we're separated, do I really worry that my wife's going to be tempted by some guy and she's going to end up having an affair on me? No, I can tell you honestly, in 18.5 years, it's never crossed my mind. Never once. In 18.5 years, I can tell you my wife, it's never crossed her mind that I'm having a physical affair with someone or any type of an affair with another woman. That is not something that crosses her mind. Why? For 2.5 years, when we could have had sex anytime we wanted, we proved to each other that God's more important commitment to us than our own feelings. So since I'm still a believer and she's still a believer, I have total confidence that God is a much more influential thing in her life than sexual desire. And we went into marriage with a built trust that you can't get anywhere else, that we never even have to deal with that worry, never even have to think about it, because I know right now it would take about 3 years of my wife having probably about 6, because I'm really good, so I narrowed it down to 2.5. But so we'll say it'd take about 6 years. Just saying I didn't. I'm not really good. I'm not saying sexually I'm really good. Just as a guy, I'm just a great guy. Okay, I don't know where your minds are going. And I apologize for all of you thinking the way you are, okay? Sorry, son. I'm so sorry you're in here this morning. Okay. The reason for this is, thank you, Gideon. All right. What I mean is this. I know logically it's going to take 3 years of some guy working on my wife to ever get her to potentially have an affair with him. I would figure it out before 3 years is up that something's going awry. She could assume the same type of thing with me. It's not going to happen just because I'm gone for 2 days or I'm gone for a week or we're having a bad time in our relationship. Why? For 2.5 years, I proved to you, honey, that God is my driving force in my life, not my sexual desires. Okay? Huge benefit to waiting until you are married. Here's what you need to understand. God's way makes a lot of sense when you think about it. The world's way sounds really good on the surface, but when you dig into it, you realize it's devastating. Sadly, most of us sitting here know the devastation firsthand. It just is what it is. It's the world we live in, okay? That's why thank God for Jesus Christ, and thank God for knowing that God can restore us and repair us from a lot of the damage of our past. And it's where some of you thank God every day for that. I don't get to thank Him for that, but you do in that area of your life, and that's wonderful. That's why we serve our God. But here's one of the things I hope I've done today is I've given you a good defense for doing it God's way and using sex the way God designed it to be used. I hope I did a good job. And you and your kids need to understand God is not looking to steal our joy, our fun, and our happiness by denying us the ability to have sex with whoever we want, whenever we want. He is not doing that. He's actually trying to protect those very things in our lives. He's trying to protect our joy, our fun, and our happiness by going, I'm trying to help you avoid the pitfalls that this behavior will lead to if you walk outside my boundaries that I give you. It's your choice, though, at the end of the day, what you choose to do. No one can force you one way or the other. Well, in certain situations, but we're not going into abusive stuff, but nobody forces you to have sex. It's a choice that you make when and where and with whom you will have sex. And at the same time, it's your lives that will suffer the consequences or receive the wonderful benefits of your choices. One last little tidbit. Parents, you must be proactive in teaching your children to think and react biblically. Okay? You cannot assume they're going to figure it out. They will not. Remember the stats? What they will figure out is a world's way. And we are called by God as parents to be the ones that teach our children God's way. So your best thing, and we're going to get in as we go through this series in Proverbs, we'll talk about parenting, and I'll rehash some of this, and I'll talk more detail on this. But one of your big things is parents, you better talk to your kids before they learn it from the world and teach them God's way so that when they are taught it from the world, they have a way to process it. Because it's a lot easier doing that than wait for the world to teach your kids, and then you have to deprogram and then try to reprocess it and then teach them something differently. That's 2 steps instead of just 1. Just so you know, my 5th grader, we've had to talk this year explaining what sexuality is, what sex is, and what God believes about it. He's in here today because I said, hey, you know what? It's good for you to probably sit in here. You need to hear this, and he's going to hear it probably another 6 to 7 times in church before he graduates high school. Why? He needs to hear these things because right now when he hears this stuff in school for the first time now, my son will process it totally different than someone who has no clue. All right? And I also made this pledge to my son, which is this. I will never put my son in a situation where he is naive about something and the world can mock him for being an idiot because he's a Christian, he's naive. That I will share with you God's view of it so you know all the information. So when you're in the conversations, you can speak wisely about it and have an influence in this world for God when no one else gives that perspective. You will be the one that can give that godly perspective. That's why parents, it's so vital for us to make sure we educate our kids in a way of God, okay, before the world educates them. Choose to do and use sex the way God intended it to be used, and you will be greatly blessed. Would you pray with me?